and there was only one Shizuo Wu capable of fighting. It must be said that the guy, after a long stay in the illusion, missed a good fight. Therefore, Shizuo Wu was even glad that there were many opponents. He had room to stretch his muscles after a long period of non-existence. Anticipating a good fight, the guy began to spin the sword around himself. Shizuo Wu was again in his favorite element. At the same time, the guy was holding his favorite weapon in his hands. The two of them with a sword were capable of much. Just in time, the enemy came to hand. By the way, for the guy himself, for his opponent's good was not enough. The guys from the enemy team tried to counterattack, but the girl with blue hair, who had already recovered a little of her strength, put up protection for Shizuo Wu. The opponents realized that they could no longer attack this couple head-on. Therefore, they decided to use cunning to stop the healer. It was lucky that Shizuo Wu saw the danger that threatened the girl in time. The noble guy was not going to offend his faithful companion. Shizuo Wu pointed his sword at the enemies who were creeping up behind the beauty, and they were thrown a fair distance away, so they no longer posed a danger. The noble guy wanted to run after the enemy, but his partner stopped his impulse. She said that the two of them were too few, and they could fall into a trap. Therefore, the girl with blue hair suggested that they first find their comrades, and only then get involved in fights. All this time, while the guys were in an illusion and fighting, Hu Songlai was chilling in the snow. Apparently, he was having fun, and was not at all worried about the fate of his teammates. But it was not very comfortable to enjoy lying on your back for a long time. Therefore, Hu Songlai sat down and shouted that Chu Wu Xingchen and the three wicked women were under the influence of illusions, and that they would soon be killed. Hu Songlai seemed to go crazy with joy. He muttered that he just had to wait for his colleagues to confirm Chu Xingchen's identity. After this, his difficult mission will be over. To celebrate, Hu began to sculpt a fox figure from the snow. He muttered that after this mission was over, he would take a long vacation. With pleasure, Hu Songlai kicked the newly made snowman and shouted that Chu Xingchen would soon die. Hu was still yelling all sorts of nasty things about Chu Xingchen when the guy called out to him from behind. Chu Xingchen stuffed Songlai's throat and yelled at him that he would attract enemies with his crazy screams and they would all be killed. Songlai was surprised. He believed that once Chu Xingchen's identity was established, he would be expelled from the tournament. But the guy didn't go anywhere, but covered his mouth with his hand. Chu Xingchen yelled at Hu that he had to do hard work while Songlai was having fun making snowmen. The guy put his unconscious comrades next to each other and barked at Hu Songlai to help him wake them up. Chu Xingchen began his difficult task with the fox. He always wanted to beat the fox, but she did not give him a reason to do it. Now an opportune opportunity has arisen. True, the fox quickly began to regain consciousness, and the ashamed Chu Xingchen asked how she was feeling. The fox was still rather lethargic and muttered something incomprehensible. Chu Xingchen realized that the fox was saying something about him and using curse words. At this time, neither the guy nor Hu Songlai noticed that the enemy had appeared behind them. When the guys realized that there was a threat, it was already too late. A girl from the opposing team landed with all her might on Chu Xingchen's back. The guy spat out a fountain of bloody saliva. True, the girl got away almost immediately, without finishing off the guys who were taken by surprise. Then the girl started beating the huge doll and swearing terribly. She furiously attacked the doll and called it every offensive word that came to her mind. The girl was almost foaming at the mouth. There was so much anger in her. She screamed why the doll was persistently following them. A guy from another team yelled that he too had fallen for the Ziyangqiu school's trick. And now, neither he nor the girls will live. A serious fight ensued between the two opposing teams. The girl was screaming that they would win, and that the guys didn't have a chance. But soon, the guys tied up their teammates, and the girl was left alone. She screamed, scared for her girls. But she herself was also being chased. The girl had to urgently escape from her pursuer. At this time, another player came to the girl's rescue. The guy protected the girl from a crushing attack by hiding her behind his back. She cast a grateful glance at her savior. Thanks to him, the girl was not killed. She only received a few scratches. The savior smiled radiantly at the girl in response. It seems he was saving not so much her as her beauty. The battle was truly large-scale. 3 academies clashed, and some of the strongest. Chu Xingchen noticed that the battle was going well. He also added that although Shiyu and Misty Pavilion are strong, they will not be able to hold out for long. Some girls were especially good during the fight. Hu Songlai did not fail to note this. Chu Xingchen asked him where he was staring, but soon the big-breasted beauty was injured. Everyone was very surprised that the fox was most worried about her. She even started screaming in fright. It must be said that the girl really had something to look at. So there was nothing strange in the fact that many were concerned about her fate. Chu Xingchen was surprised to notice that everyone around him was worried about the health of the big-breasted girl, and immediately a system appeared and invited Chu Xingchen to carry out the heroic rescue mission in order to take such a valuable girl into his harem. The guy became furious. The system snapped that Chu Xingchen should follow the example of the fox, who was ready to sacrifice her life just to save her sister. The guy decided that it was really time to join the fight. He managed to save a girl with large breasts from certain death. Chu Xingchen smiled sweetly at the girl and asked if she needed help. True, the next moment the guy was pushed away by the fox, who said that she herself would save her sister. Soon, the fox embraced the surprised girl in a tight hug. Meanwhile, the fierce battle continued, although some had already begun to lose ground. Chu Xingchen found himself in the thick of battle. Opponents were pressing on him. The Wujian school team was also threatened below. There was no place left on the battlefield that wasn't hot. Chu Xingchen eliminated one of the opponents with a well-aimed blow. But there were still a lot of them. A guy from the other team grabbed Chu Xingchen by the chest and yelled that he was an idiot and would now say goodbye to his life. Chu Xingchen used his bluff skill. It was just the right time for this. The guy whispered that the enemy's wife cheated on him with his comrade. The skill immediately began to take effect, and the attack on Chu Xingchen was stopped. But the enemy, roaring and screaming, attacked his teammate, whom Chu Xingchen pointed at when he used the bluff. Teammates attacked the crazed enemy, and they shouted why he was trying to kill a member of his own team. The victim of the surprise attack hissed, missing several teeth, that his comrade had never had a wife. The guy remembered that he really wasn't married. But it was too late. He had already beaten his comrade. In addition, the insidious enemy managed to escape while the guys were sorting it out among themselves. Chu Xingchen led the big-breasted beauty out of the thick of the battle, and now the girl was no longer in danger. She thanked the guy for his help. He tried to answer that there was nothing to thank him for, but the system immediately shut his mouth. The system reported that the girl Long Tian had a difficult childhood and was treated poorly. Therefore, she cannot be offended. The system added that Chu Xingchen needed to treat the girl with consideration. The system insisted that the guy treat Long Tian well and replenish his harem. Chu Xingchen thought that something didn't add up here, but he could not immediately understand the situation. The system continued to stick to its line that Chu Xingchen must complete tasks in order to increase his level and skills. At this time, the old man whispered into the girl's ear that Chu Xingchen seemed to have mental problems because he was talking to himself. True, some people had a question about how Grandpa got into the academy for girls. An academy with young girls, it was not at all a suitable place for a decrepit old man. The guy bluntly asked the old man what he was doing at the academy for girls. Perhaps the guy felt jealous because his grandfather was surrounded by beautiful girls. At some point, it seemed that the old man was confused and did not know what to answer. The guy thought that he had managed to pin the cunning old man against the wall. He thought that a couple more questions would bring his grandfather to clean water. But then the old man got angry and shouted at the guy whom he dared to call grandfather. The guys were even scared. They thought that maybe the old man, a martial arts master, would beat them badly. But the grandfather didn't try to fight with the guys at all. The old man said that in fact he was an ordinary girl. All the guys were very surprised. Chu Xingchen had been in a similar situation before. The guy yelled, "What kind of news is this? That on this island girls have beards and possibly other male attachments." In response, the old man shouted that this was not his body. He used to be a girl. Bursting with tears, the old man said that he would now tell the guys what was happening. He muttered that he hated this ugly male body. He missed his own body as a young girl. The old man poured some kind of magical liquid from a yellow jug. He announced that now everyone will be able to see his real body, and they will be convinced that he had a very cute and slender body. Soon, the image of a young, beautiful girl actually appeared in front of the guys. They stood there stunned. They had never seen anything like this before. Then the old man took the girl from the vision into his arms and began to roar more than ever. He whined that he couldn't wait to return to his body. The girl who was saved by Chu Xingchen put her hand on the old man's head and said that this was her little sister. She explained that her sister was under a soul-altering spell. As a result, the girl's soul exchanged bodies with the corpse doll of an old man. This happened during the battle with the Misty Flower Pavilion. True, the girls managed to catch the sorcerer of the enemy team, who was directing spells at them. They had not yet decided what to do with him, but everyone understood that nothing good awaited him. The girl in the body of an old man hated the sorcerer with all her heart. She started hitting him with all her might. Her sister had to stand up for the enemy sorcerer so that he would not be killed ahead of time. As a result, the old man threw himself on his sister's chest in tears. He was not yet quite accustomed to his new body and could not accurately calculate his strength. As a result, her sister's thin blouse tore, and the girl covered herself with her hands so that others would not see her nakedness. The old man began to apologize terribly for his carelessness. Chu Xingchen continued to look at the girl's naked back in shock. He even called up a system that knew the answers to almost all of his questions. The guy's hopes were justified. The system informed him that he saw a high-level artifact on the girl's bare shoulder. The system clarified that this is an earthly artifact called a traveler. The system also said that artifacts come in different shapes, and the higher the level of the artifact, the more hidden it is. Chu Xingchen also learned that the artifacts of the system are divided into 5 levels: heavenly, earthly, xuan, advanced, and normal. The system reported that it looked like they wanted to kill the girl. It turned out that the traveler artifact can make a person mediocre, destroying all his qualities. Chu Xingchen asked the system how he could rid the girl of this vile thing. The system informed the guy that the artifact was very difficult to remove. To do this, you need a device to draw out curses. The system added that there are also similar artifacts on 2 other people. Apparently, these things were put into people's bodies during the battle. The system believed that there were traitors on the team. She said that such artifacts are very, very expensive. The system also said that it knows what people will do with a fake system. At this time, the other part of the Wujin school team was hiding from the superior numbers of the enemy. The gunslinger girl went on reconnaissance. At this time, the opponents were wandering through the snow, trying to find traces of the other team. The guys quietly talked to each other so that they could study everything carefully and not miss anything. The gunner girl returned to her teammates and said that they were safe for now and that they needed to continue digging the tunnel. Limu was the first to wake up after the guys fell into the illusion. She saw that the enemy was approaching and something urgently needed to be done to save both herself and her comrades. The guys began to dig an underground tunnel, and it turned out to be very timely. The tunnel helped them escape from Shuanqi Academy. But it was too early to relax. After the illusion, only 13 people gathered. They didn't know where the rest of their team's strongest members were. If the princess or Shizua Wu had been with them, things would have been different. At this time on the same plane, but in a different place. Faithful Hao Gang carried the princess on her shoulders, who was still in the world of illusions. The wind made it difficult to move forward, but the girl did not give up. Although her legs were weak, she had no intention of abandoning her precious burden, her princess. It should be noted that Her Majesty knew how to win people over. Out of the corner of her eye, Hao Gang saw movement to her right. Someone was quickly approaching her. There was very little hope that these were their friends. In fact, they turned out to be guys from the opposing team. Moreover, they were more than aggressive. Hao Gang realized that there was no time to waste. The girl started running as fast as she could, not making out the road in front of her. But the burden was too heavy for her to be able to run away from her pursuers for a long time. Hao Gang came up with a good idea. She decided to use a rope to deceive the guys from the opposing team. This could give some kind of advantage over enemies. The girl threw the rope onto a strong tree trunk and managed to lift herself into the air along with the unconscious princess. For a moment, Hao Gang even thought that they were safe, but a strong blow from the enemies overtook the girls even in the air. Hao Gang realized that it was all over. Wounded, she could not hold the rope, especially with Her Majesty on her shoulders. As a result of this attack, the girls began to fall to the ground. Even while flying, Hao Gang tried to cover the princess's helpless body. But it was also not easy for her, who was wounded. As a result, Hao Gang hit her head on the ground, taking the full force of the blow onto herself. The girl managed to soften her mistress's fall at the cost of her own body. Besides the boys, there were also girls among the opponents. But their clothes were not too different from men's clothes. True, the bloodied Haogeng was already indifferent. From the conversations of the enemy team, it became clear that only the princess was important to them, and they were going to kill Haogeng. In addition, the enemies talked about the need to have time to put an artifact into the body. The girl realized that the enemies with her mistress wanted to do something bad. She reproached herself for not being able to save the princess. Haogeng tried to gather her will into a fist. The girl gathered her last strength and crawled to Her Majesty. It seemed that the princess was sleeping soundly. Haogeng began to bother her mistress, still hoping to tear her out of the world of illusions. A girl from the opposing team called Haogeng, a devoted dog who protects her owner until her last breath. She growled that she would now deal with the restless dog. Driven by the chase, the girl screamed at the top of her lungs that she would now release life from the mortal body of the maid. Haogeng realized that her last minute had come, but the enemy's cry woke up the princess. She immediately realized that Haogeng was in mortal danger. Therefore, the princess immediately pulled out her formidable weapon and struck. Her Majesty's powerful blow threw the enemy far to the side, and the faithful Haogeng was saved. The awakening of the princess radically changed the entire picture of the battle. The princess was so furious that she seemed possessed. Her eyes, usually red during battle, this time glowed with devilish fire. No one wanted to fall under her hot hand. The enraged princess was perhaps the most formidable weapon in the whole country, and nothing good was in store for her enemies. With one blow, Her Majesty drove the enemy deep into the ground. All that was left of the opponents was a wet spot, and at the site of the impact, a deep crater formed from the princess's powerful hammer. Bright scarlet blood sprayed in all directions. Haogeng and the surviving opponents looked in amazement at what the princess was doing. No one suspected that the fragile, gentle body of the young princess could contain so much anger. Haogeng, who was still dripping blood from her mouth, looked at her mistress in awe and fear. Although the girl had known Her Majesty for many years, she had never seen her in such a state. The princess growled through her teeth that these people had driven her mother to death, and they would pay dearly for it. Burning hatred ran through every word of the highborn girl. Her Majesty's eyes still glowed red. A stingy tear rolled down the girl's cheek. It seemed as if her very soul had turned black. And the next moment, the princess exploded. Like a hurricane, Her Majesty attacked her stunned opponents. They didn't even understand how to defend themselves from such a fierce attack. However, the burning hammer was approaching them. But one of the opponents, seeing that soon there would be nothing left of them, remembered a way that could stop the princess. The guy drew a circle in the air with his index finger. As a result of his actions, the princess was bound hand and foot with sparkling chains. Indeed, only witchcraft could stop such a powerful attack. Her Majesty could not free her arms or legs. She could only dangle in the air and look around, trying to notice the approaching enemy. True, the enemy turned out to be too insidious. The ground beneath where the princess was hanging began to crack and crumble. The girl looked at her feet in surprise. Soon she saw a sneaky magician from the opposing team crawling out of the ground. The enemy rushed towards the princess, shouting that the last hour of her life had come. True, Her Majesty was not going to give up so easily. She let her opponent get closer and then powerfully hit him with her head, the only part of her body not bound. The princess became furious again. Her eyes glowed with fire, and her body was filled with otherworldly power. Her Majesty pulled with all her might the chains that held her in the air. The magician who kept the princess in chains began to experience great strain. He was simply unable to hold back the enraged girl, although he did everything he could. But in the end, the princess broke her shackles and scattered their pieces in different directions. There seemed to be no limits to her anger. The enemies realized that now they would have a hard time. The magician tried to stop Her Majesty with a new attack. He understood that the princess would not spare him. Therefore, the sorcerer put all his strength into the attack to stop the angry girl. It seemed that the princess did not even pay attention to the magician's attempts to defend herself. She continued to approach him, no matter what. Her Majesty raised her hammer above her head. Then the girl made several sharp blows, and the magician's entire defense was smashed to smithereens. Now nothing separated the offender and his former victim. The hour of reckoning has arrived. The princess once again swung her formidable weapon, and the magician began to pray to all the gods whose names he could remember. But the ominous gleam in Her Majesty's eyes did not promise salvation for the enemy. Finally, the princess struck. It seemed that after this blow, the magician of the enemy team had no chance of surviving. Everyone thought that he would be finished. True, other members of the enemy team watched the battle from the sidelines. And one of the guys tried to save his friend. He didn't know whether his idea would succeed, but he still decided to try. As a result of his actions, the princess's hammer stopped just a few inches from the magician's face. The sorcerer looked with horror and awe at the burning hammer that hung above his head. A teammate bound the princess's weapon with magical chains and thereby saved his comrade from imminent death. Everyone watching the battle froze in silent amazement. The comrade shouted to the magician to run away, since he would not be able to hold back the mad pressure of the princess for long. Time was counted in seconds. The princess saw that her victim remained safe and sound. She began to approach her opponent, this time with bare hands, because she could not free the hammer from its grip. Then, still with her bare hands, Her Majesty pushed the head of a magician from the enemy team straight into the flames of the hammer. At that moment, the princess's face completely lost its human appearance. Continuing to hold her opponent's face with her hand, the princess waited until the face burned to the ground. The magician was dying in terrible pain, and his teammates did not know how to help him. The princess did not even pay attention to the pain from the burns. She burned more than just her hand. She also had burnt spots on her face. But the worst thing was her eyes burning with hatred. The guys from the opposing team were speechless and froze. They had never seen such cruelty before. Moreover, they could not imagine that the princess was capable of such atrocity. Haogung was also numb from horror and excess of feelings. She had no idea what the princess was capable of. Haogung always considered her owner to be a gentle, loving, and sweet girl. Amazed spectators also whispered about the princess's obsession. Some paid attention to her burning eyes. Others were struck by the mask of hatred that shackled Her Majesty's face. The mentor and coach of the Wujin school team were also amazed at what the princess had just done. They could not explain to themselves the reason for what happened, but the mentor of the Divine Moon Academy knew something. He muttered that the mad blood, the legacy left by the late empress, was making itself known again. The old mentor knew that the higher the talent, the stronger the curse. As a person ages, the curse eats away at a person and makes him insane. When such a person goes crazy, his strength increases many times over, although the power of the soul spontaneously burns, and the possessed person can die when he uses up all his energy. The director of the Moon Academy knew that only demons had red pupils. He warned His Majesty to cleanse the princess's body after the empress's family was exterminated. True, the emperor did not listen to the smart old man. Now the whole world has seen what a monster the princess is turning into. Nobody wanted to have a crazy princess over them. However, Her Majesty continued to smash with her hammer, destroying everything around her and not looking around. From the tremors after the blows of the burning hammer, Haogung was thrown to the ground. The girl was very afraid of everything that was happening. But she absolutely did not understand what could be done in such a difficult situation. She could not and did not want to fight her mistress. Meanwhile, the princess raised a fire hammer over Haogung's head and shouted that the girl must die. Spectators of the competition have never seen a crazier act. Everyone held their breath and waited for the outcome of this drama. You can understand how painful it was for the princess's loved ones to watch her actions. But no one could fix this situation. The bearded old lady Kong Lao's eyes widened. The face of the Wujin school coach turned to stone, and the teacher turned completely white and bit his own lip until it bled. With a deafening roar of flame, the princess delivered a powerful blow to the place where her faithful assistant Haogung had recently stood. The hammer sank deep into the ground, which cracked from the impact. The truth turned out that Haogung was saved. Moreover, everything happened so quickly and unexpectedly that almost everyone thought that the girl was already finished. Help came from unexpected places. The girl suspended in the air reproached the princess. She quietly said that there was no point in trying to kill your teammates. Such actions are not typical for people. How? Gung looked back at her savior in surprise. Kong Feng hung next to her. The girl, as always, looked elegant in her light and beautiful clothes. True, the appearance of this girl affected Her Majesty like a red rag on a bull. The princess said the girl's name with hatred. Her look again did not bode well. Kong Feng was a girl from West Island Academy. Despite her young age, she was already a martial artist. The girl had long been known outside her academy. Kong Feng, along with Wen Mao from Qinshan Academy, were the most likely contenders to join the Emperor's kingdom in the new generation. The bearded granny muttered that Kong Feng always kept a low profile, and she didn't think that this girl would have to clash with a princess who had lost her mind. Granny muttered that Kong Feng was apparently no less crazy than the princess. Otherwise, she wouldn't have bothered. The princess, in a fit of rage, has already killed a dozen people. True, the girl did not even think about retreating. She was even touched that the princess, even in such a frenzied state, remembered her person. Kong Feng muttered that she was valuable. True, the princess did not appreciate Kong Feng's calm speech and friendly address. Her Majesty began to yell at the newcomer to shut her mouth and remember her place. True, apparently Kong Feng was not going to hide in a corner and silently wait for Her Majesty to take out her hammer and slam her down like a pathetic insect. Instead, Kong Feng whispered that if the princess killed anyone else, then her mother's death would have been in vain. It seems Her Majesty listened to the girl's words. At least the princess's expression softened. The bestial features that so frightened all the spectators, and especially Hao Geng, disappeared. Her Majesty thought about it. It must be said that Kong Feng acted quite insidiously. She lulled Her Majesty's vigilance, and then dealt her a blow, albeit quite softly, one might even say gentle. Kong Feng muttered that she would not stoop to fight with crazy people. Therefore, she poisoned the princess to clear her head a little and realize her actions with the remnants of her mind. True, Kong Feng gradually began to speed up the princess's flight. The girl laughed and declared that this piece of flame, which is called Her Majesty, should be cooled in the strong wind. The princess grew faster and faster, prompted by the actions of the girl from the West Island Academy. Soon the flight reached such a speed that Her Majesty screamed in horror. Then, Kong Feng began throwing the princess from side to side like a ball. One could only imagine what Her Majesty had to endure during such rapid somersaults. Hao Geng watched in amazement as the girl from the Western Island twirled her owner in the air from side to side. She screamed that enough was enough, and it was better to lower the princess to the ground. True, Kong Feng did not take much care in gently lowering the princess to the ground. She simply dropped it. The princess splashed loudly on the frozen ground. It seemed that the princess lost consciousness, or even lost her life. She looked simply terrible. Foam came out of the mouth, and the face was first burned and then frostbitten. Hao Geng rushed to her mistress and tried to bring her to her senses. True, the princess's body dangled like a rag doll, and no glimmer of consciousness appeared in her eyes. But gradually Her Majesty came to her senses. She was very surprised why her hands were burned. The princess did not remember anything of what had happened to her recently. Kong Feng said that she was glad that the princess had finally recovered. True, Her Majesty, apparently, did not have any warm feelings for her unexpected benefactor. Hao Geng stood up for the girl, and she said that she helped them a lot. The princess angrily replied that she had not asked for any help. Her Majesty glared at Kong Feng. The girl muttered offendedly why the princess was always so rude to her. She was simply trying to help Her Majesty in a difficult situation. The princess didn't want to hear anything. Hao Geng began to thank the girl herself on behalf of herself and the princess. From which Her Majesty began to get angry again and called her subordinate a traitor and defector. Hao Geng, with tears in her eyes, threw herself at the princess's feet and began to beg her to forgive her. But the princess continued to be angry and tried to shake the crying girl off her leg. Then, the princess decided to check whether the sound transmission spell worked. She began calling other team members, hoping that someone would eventually get in touch with her. For some time, Her Majesty could not contact anyone. It looked like the transmitter was working, though. The princess even began to suspect that the rest of the team had already been killed. When Her Majesty began to summon Chu Xingchen, her face lit up with a radiant smile. And everyone was again surprised how just recently the bestial grin had now turned into a sweet smile. Chu Xingchen was also happy to hear from the other team members. He suspected that many were no longer alive. The princess's sweet voice immediately lifted the guy's mood and morale. Chu Xingchen called other team members. He gave everyone an order to take care of each other and gradually get closer to the rest of the Wujin school. The guy asked if the princess and Shizuo Wu were really attacked by representatives of Shuyanqi Academy. The guys were surprised how Chu Xingchen knew about this circumstance. The guy muttered that he had some guesses. Then Chu Xingchen cursed. Although the guys did not understand yet, the guy believed that the situation was more than serious. Chu Xingchen added that Shuyanqi Academy is attacking all young masters and trying to put certain artifacts into them. Those present were very surprised by this fact. The guy once again asked all team members to take care of themselves and not take unnecessary risks. He especially asked for the princess since she is the strongest member of their team. Chu Xingchen also told the princess that they were collaborating with Shiyu Academy, so there was no point in trying to kill them. Kong Feng said that it turns out that they are now partners with the princess. Her Majesty only snapped that no one would want to work with Kong Feng anyway. She then informed Chu Xingchen that they were south of a small bridge. The other guys reported that they were attacked by Yuling Academy, and they really needed help. They added that they had no way of moving towards other members of the Wujin school team. The guys also reported that due to the numerical superiority of the enemy, they were forced to hide underground. They suffered losses and killed and captured prisoners. It turned out that Li Mu, who was with this part of the team, was captured by the enemy. The girl was seriously wounded and could not fend for herself at all. Li Mu's situation was critical. Without outside help, part of the team that was with the girl was not able to recapture her from the enemy. But something had to be done urgently. But even in such a deplorable state, the girl tried to think about some possibilities of escape. She toyed with various possibilities in her head, but had to reject them all. Moreover, even the injured Li Mu was not left alone. The enemy beat the girl, hoping to get valuable information from her. But despite the torture, she continued to remain silent. They kicked Li Mu in the face and even stood on her head. The enemy really wanted to know where her teammates were hiding. The enemies did not pay attention to the fact that she was already wounded. The guys from Yuling Academy took competition very seriously. Therefore, they were not going to let anyone down. They didn't know if it was a guy or a girl, whether he was healthy or wounded. True, Li Mu not only did not succumb to torture, she still managed to make fun of her enemies. She said that they were not capable of anything and that they would not be able to get information from her. One of the Yuling Academy team members even admired the girl's courage and dedication. But he also said that he has ways to get even such stubborn girls to talk. The guy said that his uncle was a prison guard, and he taught him some tricks. Then the enemy fished out a red-hot needle from somewhere and laughed ominously. When the guy started poking the hot needle under the girl's nails, she screamed loudly. She had never experienced such pain before. She understood that she would not stand it for long. At the same time, the guy added that he still has tools from his uncle's arsenal that will allow him to loosen the tongue of any opponent. Even the sight of tongs made the girl tremble. While performing his manipulations with the girl's fingers, the enemy said that these were special torture needles that had the ability to double the pain and maintain it for a long time. The guy told Li Mu that he had no personal grudge against their school, but his training depends on the Zhu family, and so he is forced to do dirty and menial work for them. While telling his story, the guy continued to torture the girl's fingers. He worked methodically, remembering to hurt her as much as possible, and didn't miss a single finger. Even the guys from the opposing team were horrified to see Li Mu's suffering. But no one dared to interfere with the torture procedure. It seems that everyone listened to the opinion of the sadist who tormented the girl. The guy continued to bully. He also told the girl that it was not a problem that she was so intractable. It will only make things worse for her. He pulled something else out of his pocket. He showed Li Mu a small pocket knife. The guy asked the girl what she thought her comrades on her team would do when they heard her heartbreaking screams. The girl was severely wounded and was bleeding. More wounds were added to her during the torture. But the guy managed to cause her such severe pain that she screamed heartrendingly with all her might. One of the girls wanted to come to Li Mu's aid, but her friends dissuaded her. They said that it was a trap, that the girl was deliberately forced to scream in order to lure them out of hiding. True, hearing the screams of a captive teammate was unbearable. The Wujin team members hoped that their comrades would come soon and help rescue Li Mu and kill the enemies. But the wait was unbearable. In addition, the guys still did not have confirmation that they were already coming to their aid. Therefore, for now, they could only rely on themselves. Suddenly, Li Mu's screams stopped. The guys began to talk among themselves, making assumptions about why the girl fell silent. Still, the guys didn't want to think about the worst. At this time, a girl from their team was lying on the floor, bloodied. Various objects were stuffed into her body. The bleeding did not stop for a minute. It seemed like she wasn't breathing. The guys from Yuling Academy thought that perhaps they had overdone it and accidentally killed the girl. In the end, she could simply die from loss of blood. This could also happen. Li Mu, truly bloodied, writhed on the floor and froze. She may have already taken her last breath and finished the competition. One of the guys looked at the girl closer. It turned out that Li Mu was breathing and her eyes were open. But she clenched her teeth tightly so as not to make any more sound. She did not want to give her enemies the slightest reason for satisfaction. One of the guys muttered that he couldn't believe her comrades left her to die alone and didn't come to her aid. It seems that the Yuling Academy team's plan failed to pay off. The guys were never able to lure the Wujin team members out of hiding. At this time, Li Mu thought that she was not worth saving. She believed that she herself deserved her fate and torture. The opponents looked at the girl's mutilated body. Some felt pity for her, but others were not against further aggravating her torment. It's good that she was still alive. Li Mu blamed herself for everything. In early childhood, her mother abandoned her, and her father betrayed her. Therefore, she got used to enduring suffering and only clenched her teeth even tighter so as not to scream in pain. She was left alone with her little brother in her arms. She had no one to rely on. And at such a young age, the girl learned to take responsibility and solve her problems. Therefore, even in this critical situation, she believed that she did not need the sympathy or pity of other people. She was sure that she got what she deserved. But soon the silence was broken by the roar of flames that quickly cut through the air. The sound was quite familiar to all members of the Wujin school team. This was the sound of one formidable weapon. Soon the scream of the owner of the weapon was heard. So spectacularly, the princess appeared in the enemy camp in person. The two red coals burning in her eyes inspired fear. The enemies did not have time to come to their senses and react to the sudden attack, as Her Majesty was already hovering over them, raising her hammer. The spectacle was truly breathtaking. True, it was exciting for observers from the outside, whereas for the members of Yuling's team, everything was quite tragic. The princess smashed and threw the hammer in all directions. Those opponents who managed to survive had to urgently retreat so that they could lose their lives. The princess really didn't particularly chase the enemy, who turned on the rear one. Her Majesty picked up Li Mu's bleeding and carried her onto her shoulder. The princess growled menacingly towards her opponents, but apparently did not intend to finish them off. This gave the Yuling Academy team some time to breathe. They regrouped and decided to attack, seeing that this time they had caught a very large fish in their net. Moreover, the princess was constrained by the weight of Li Mu's body, which hung limply on Her Majesty's shoulder. But it seemed that the princess was not at all concerned about the return of her opponents. Li Mu began to whisper to the princess to leave her and save herself. The girl added that she did not have a high rank, and Her Majesty should not risk her life for her. The princess did not tolerate being contradicted, especially when they also teach her. Therefore, she threateningly barked at Li Mu to keep quiet and not interfere with her work with her nonsense. An hour before the princess, like a tornado, flew into the Yuling school team, a small military council was held in the forest nearby. Its main participant was, Hey, princess! She didn't want to take Hao Geng with her. Her Majesty believed that there would be enough fighting for her subordinate for now. But the girl was afraid to let Her Majesty go alone. The princess said that Li Mu was being tortured very nearby, and she was going to go and find out everything. Her Majesty ordered Kong Feng to take her assistant to Chu Xingchen. How? Gung still resisted. But the princess resolutely declared that she would do as she said. She added that she was not going to expose herself to unnecessary danger, but was simply scouting. Her Majesty looked at her subordinate and at Kong Feng. Seeing that the girls were still hesitating, she told them not to worry, because she was not an idiot and would not get into trouble. True, an hour later, in the heat of battle, the princess was screaming at the top of her lungs that she was an idiot and that the enemy should save himself while there was such an opportunity. Everyone was wary of the enraged princess. The Yuling Academy team surrounded the princess almost in full force. At least everyone who was alive at that time was present. A terrible massacre was planned. Li Mu again began to irritate the princess with statements that she should not have come for her and needlessly put her life in danger. Instead of answering, the princess growled. True, Her Majesty soon missed a strong blow directly to the head. The princess tried to hold the wounded Li Mu with one hand and repel the attack with her free hand. The opponents shouted that no matter how good the princess was, she would not be able to defeat their entire team. She was asked to give up in order to save her life. But there was no answer. But almost immediately there was a blow from the princess's fiery hammer. Her Majesty burned several arrogant but unwary opponents. But this was only a small tactical success. Li Mu again began to complain that because of her, the princess got into trouble. The girl again invited Her Majesty to leave her and get out as quickly as possible. Li Mu added that the princess is the most powerful attacker on the Wujin school team, and without her heavy burden, she would not only be more effective, but would also score a lot of points. One of Yuling's team managed to approach the princess unnoticed. The big guy raised his hands up to gain momentum and hit the princess well. Her Majesty listened to Li Mu's endless whining and therefore did not immediately notice the threat that loomed over her. True, in such a situation, it would be difficult for her to dodge. As a result, the enemy managed to make a blow of crushing force that would have knocked anyone down. It seemed to observers that there was no wet spot left from the girls. Li Mu, barely alive, saw what was happening to the princess. Flames roared deafeningly all around. The ring of enemies became closer every minute. The princess still stood on her feet and held off the furious attack of a strong opponent. Flames swirled around Her Majesty, but she tried to survive at all costs. The enemy struck again, this time even stronger than the previous one. The enemy understood that the girls were almost completely at his mercy, and it was only a matter of time before the princess's protection fell. Academy team member Yuling continued to throw blow after blow. Each time the princess's defenses became weaker. Moreover, she had to cover instead of 1-2 people. Meanwhile, other people from the enemy team were getting closer. The girls continued to sit under the shield, unable to regroup and retaliate. It seemed that every next blow would be the last for the girls. But they continued to cover themselves with a shield. At some point, it even seemed to the enemy that the princess's power was inexhaustible, but soon everyone saw that blood was pouring out of the princess's eyes. Her Majesty herself understood that such tension could not be withstood indefinitely. And in the end, she will have to pay for it. The guys from the opposing team started laughing that the princess wanted to become a hero so much that she let the team down. Someone said that because of the princess's stupidity, they would have a lot of points. The princess shouted that she might be stupid, but as long as she was on the team, she was not going to sit idly by and watch her team members being cut into little pieces. Li Mu heard Her Majesty's evil speech with surprise and awe. She understood that the princess was made of a different cloth than herself, and this made itself felt. The princess further growled that even if it was a trap and she fell into it, she might be considered stupid. Her Majesty added that the finale of the battle would put everything in place. Then the princess yelled that if it was about the team, then soon no one would have any questions about her team. She added that there simply would be no one left to ask questions. Amazed by everything that was happening around her, Li Mu saw a circle of light around her. In the first moments, the girl did not understand what this meant. She was too stunned. At this time, Her Majesty managed to wriggle free, and she jumped high into the air, spinning her heavy hammer in her hand. The next moment, the princess sat down next to the stunned Li Mu. As soon as the immediate threat disappeared, the princess immediately used her fire hammer, scattering her hated enemies in different directions. The nature of the battle has changed dramatically. Her Majesty seemed to have almost regained her strength. She tore and tossed. The representatives of the Yuling Academy team scattered in different directions, like a flock of crows at the sight of an eagle. The princess roared even louder than before. She shouted that the opponent had started counting his points early. After all, everyone knows that points should be counted only after the end of the battle. Limu was simply delighted with the princess. Her courage, dedication, courage, endurance, faith in her strength. And Her Majesty had many other qualities. The princess threw Limu to stay where she was. She herself rushed after the retreating enemies. She shouted that thanks to their trap, she would be able to score a lot of points. Her Majesty rushed on the battlefield in different directions and struck at enemies who had numerical superiority. But despite their advantage, they could not catch the princess. When the enemy thought that they had already squeezed the princess in a vice, the girl always managed to dodge and escape. And her counterattacks were explosive and unexpected. In the excitement of the battle, the princess even lifted large stones into the air. At least it might be more accurate to call them small rocks. Her Majesty used them as weapons. Since there were a lot of opponents, the princess did not hesitate to use any available materials. The main thing for her was to inflict maximum damage on the enemy. So the boulders that came to the princess's hand came in very handy. They bruised and crushed several people from the enemy team. Her Majesty was quite pleased with herself. Soon, the ranks of the Yuling Academy team were greatly thinned. The remaining guys tried to crawl away from the princess, who was striking in all directions. It seemed that everything was over for them. The princess was clearly in shock. Nothing could stop her. Although she only fought alone, her blows were very powerful, and agility allowed him to dodge a counterattack. For a long time, Yuling Academy could not do anything about the raging princess. In panic, they scattered in different directions and only prevented each other from taking cover or attacking. Finally, one guy from Yuling shouted for the guys to remember the training and start working harmoniously and methodically, as they were taught. He recalled that they still had the advantage. The change in tactics had its effect. Soon the blows began to overtake the princess. It wasn't easy for her. When the opponents began to attack all together, it became difficult to dodge. Blood appeared on the princess's face again. She realized that the tension was too great, and there were too many opponents. Something urgently needed to be done to change the situation. The wounded Limu again began to lament that it was all her fault. Without her, the princess would have been able to score much more points. Besides, Her Majesty would not expose herself to such a risk. It was unbearably hard for the girl to watch how the princess fought with all her might, but was still doomed to defeat. Only a miracle could save Her Majesty, but where could it come from? During the battle, the princess shouted to Limu that it was too early to write her off, and that she would demonstrate the real art of fighting to Yuling Academy. At least she wasn't going to give up. A guy from the opposing team started yelling that the princess was trying to act like a hero. He also added that she does not care about the interests of the team. She puts her interests above all else. The princess held on with all her might. From the outside, it seemed as if it was made of iron. She silently endured enormous loads and tried not to succumb to the provocations of her opponents. She made a decision for herself that although she was not destined to survive in this battle, she must score maximum points for the team. The princess was going to kill 10 more people. True, soon not tears flowed from Her Majesty's eyes, but real blood. Now it was really all over. There was no way to retreat, and there was no strength to continue the battle. The princess's blood fell on the face of one guy from Yuling Academy. He jumped back in fright, but it was already useless. He even tried to run away, but the guy's face began to burn with a strange burgundy flame. He was shocked by what was happening. The representatives of his team recoiled from the guy in fear. Soon, this guy began to burn with the same burgundy flame. In fact, he turned into a living torch. The guy screamed heart-rendingly, trying to put out the flames with his own hands. His teammates looked at him in horror. They were surprised that a few drops of the princess's blood could do such a terrible thing. Friends could not help the guy. He glowed even brighter, screamed even louder. But soon his cry was cut off at the highest note. His now lifeless body fell onto the frozen ground, but continued to burn. It was even scary to look at the princess. She resembled a terrible demon rising from hell. Her face turned into two huge eyes, blazing with scarlet fire. The princess touched another enemy with her hand, and he also burned brightly, like a pine torch. Meanwhile, the princess kept count of the opponents she was killing. She once again extended her burning hand forward, and already the third enemy turned into a crimson pillar of fire. True, the guy managed to strike the princess with a strong blow with his sword, trying to pierce her. Although the enemy was aiming at Her Majesty's heart, his hand trembled, and the sharp blade of the sword pierced the girl's body below the shoulder. Nevertheless, the wound was very dangerous. At this time, the princess remembered the coach's words. He said that they are a team, and their mistakes are shared by everyone, and Her Majesty is dragging the team down. The princess became furious again. She pulled the shining sword from the wound with her bare hand. Despite the enormous pain, the princess did not even wince. She thought not for herself, but for working for the benefit of the Wujin school team. Then the princess, shouting that she was not going to pull the team down, rushed into another attack. It seems she no longer had any strength left. Her Majesty used only her will. Here is another member of the Yuling Academy team who received a fatal blow and was eliminated from the game. The princess no longer looked much like a person. Her body was heating up more and more. Seeing the monster that the princess had turned into, the guys from the opposing team got ready to retreat. They were not afraid to fight against humans, but now it was not a human being in front of them. The judges again exchanged comments. The Divine Moon's mentor noticed that the princess's mad blood had activated again. Old Lady Kong Lao added that it is even worse now. The bearded old lady whispered that the uncontrolled combustion of soul power was burning the life of the princess. Even in illusion, Her Majesty managed to cause herself harm that was significant in real life. The prince shouted that it was urgent to stop the competition and remove the princess from there in order to calm her down. It was unbearable for him to look at the crazy actions of the girl dear to him. True, a representative of the Divine Moon Academy stated that such a decision would not be fair to other participants in the competition. They listened to the old man's voice. The old man muttered that the prince was trying to use his position to influence the outcome of the competition. To which he replied that he was simply worried about his sister, whose health was at risk. The princess was truly in a very terrible state. Blood was oozing from her mouth, nose, and eyes. The wounded shoulder burned with fire. The girl literally fell off her feet from fatigue, but Her Majesty was by no means going to give up. She believed that as long as her heart kept beating, she must continue to fight for herself and her comrades. The princess took a fighting stance and was about to send several more people to the next world. Desperate blows flew in her direction, but she repelled them with a wall of purple fire. Then Her Majesty again rushed to the attack. She also wanted to kill a couple of enemies to get a few more points for the team. That was all the princess could think about. She just needed to destroy a few more opponents. And the princess tried to squeeze the last juices out of her collapsing body. Thoughts were confused in her head. The wide blade of a long, sharp sword. The blade was covered in blood. It continued to glisten with metal, but it also had the crimson bloody reflections of human blood on it. The princess's eyes became almost human, although they still retained that terrible red hue of hell. In the eyes of Her Majesty, one could read one feeling: surprise. The members of the Yuling school team opened their mouths and widened their eyes in amazement. It seemed to them that this was not real. The guys couldn't believe what happened to Her Majesty. Nevertheless, a long sword stuck out from the princess's chest like a stake. It looks like Her Majesty has been stabbed in the back. The tip of the sword pierced right through her body and came out at the top of her chest. Then, the smartly dressed guy silently pulled his sword from the princess's body. Her bloody body fell to the ground and convulsed for the last time. There was deathly silence. The sharp-dressed guy muttered that the princess couldn't even control the power of her soul. The guy added that at this rate the princess would burn her soul. For some time the guy stood silently, apparently thinking about something. None of the Yuling school team dared to break the silence. Silence hung in the air like an axe. Then, the guy dressed to the nines looked back at the motionless body of the princess and muttered that someone needed to do this. He added that the princess needed to leave the competition and rest. The princess opened her eyes. The remnants of life still glimmered in her body. The thought that she had let the team down was running through her mind again. The girl continued to reproach herself for the points for the team. An image of Chu Xingqian appeared in the princess's fevered brain, saying that Her Majesty was the most powerful attacker of the entire team, so she should not risk herself. The rapid patter of feet could be heard nearby in the snowy area. Therefore, a group of people did not have to fear that other commands would hear them and try to attack. It was rushing towards the rest of the Wujian school team, some of the people who were with Li Mu. The girl was carried because her injuries were too serious. The guys called Chu Xingqian and reported that the princess was no longer alive. They added that it was an unequal fight, and Her Majesty had no chance. It was a difficult loss. The guys explained to Chu Xingqian that they could not save the princess. There were too many opponents. They only managed to pick up Li Mu during the confusion. Out of the corner of his eye, Chu Xingqian saw a strange expression on Hu Songlai's face. The guy looked back at Chu Xingqian warily, and he seemed to have a guilty expression on his face. Meanwhile, the guys reported to Chu Xingqian that the enemies seemed to know everything about their movements, and they could not manage to escape from the enemy team. This raised some questions. The guys also said that their pursuers had finally left them behind. The enemy switched to confrontation with Qinshan Academy. This gave them the opportunity to escape. The person who killed the princess was Wen Mao, who just happened to represent Qinshan Academy. True, the guy did not appear alone. He came with part of his team. The Yuelin school officials started yelling at Wen Mao that he had stolen their glasses. They fought with the princess for a long time. They had a lot of dead, and Wen Mao took the glasses for himself. Wen Mao didn't like this kind of talk. He said that the guys from Yuling school are just talking to him and trying to stall for time. The guy added that it was time to end things with them. Her teammates supported Wen Mao's thoughts. They began vying with each other to shout that it was time to end Yuelin Academy. The guys got very excited and were ready to fight. The representatives of Qinshan Academy looked quite menacing, and their very appearance alone caused fear in the enemy. Moreover, the guys got close and already wanted to start the attack. The guys from Yuling Academy realized that things were bad. It was not at all like fighting a whole crowd against one princess. Now they were confronted by quite serious opponents. Yuling Academy began to retreat, or rather, simply run away. Seeing this, one of the guys on the opposing team showed one characteristic gesture that was well known in his team. Soon, swords with red hilts appeared near the retreating Yuling boys. Swords were flying from above, and there were a lot of them. They quickly approached the fleeing people. Soon, the representatives of Yuling's team were literally trapped, surrounded by huge swords that closed all opportunities for retreat. The audience was delighted that the huge sword was installed in almost a few seconds. The spectators shouted greetings to Murongji, who was a disciple of the great Qingshan. Spectators prepared for an entertaining spectacle. The Yueling Academy team was surrounded. They could not retreat, which means they would have to fight to the last to save lives. The public knew that Qingshan Academy specialized in swordsmanship. The guys used all the fighting spirits as swords. Everyone hoped to enjoy their swordsmanship. It is clear that Yueling Academy could not do anything against such guys. Already before the battle, it was clear that they would have huge losses, and maybe no one would survive. Soon, Qinshan Academy began to descend over the place where the guys from the other team were trapped. Wen Mao was the first to open the hunting season for the Yueling Academy team. Qingshan Academy was gradually surrounded by the enemy. The ring was shrinking every minute. It was already clear to many how this unequal battle would end. It seemed that the last minutes of participation in the competition had come for the guys from Yueling